rubric of the fake web, fighting fake traffic in financial brands marketing funnels. And we've got Lucas Rabinowitz, who's an Associate Vice President for Growth at Check. So welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Would you introduce yourself a little more?
Of course. So my name is Lucas Rabinowitz. Like I said, I'm our Associate Vice President of Growth globally here at Check. I actually worked before Check in the financial services vertical at Salesforce for several years, helping financial marketers achieve their goals around personalization and analytics. And so I'm really happy to be here today talking about how we can protect you from one of the threats that I think is the least talked about threat in the marketing world right now, which is the impact of fake traffic and artificial intelligence on all of your marketing programs today. And specifically how that actually shows up in the world of financial marketers and the impact it could have throughout your entire ecosystem. So it's an exciting topic. It might be a bit of a new topic, so if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them at the end as well. This is just to go over a little bit about how we're going to talk about this today. We're going to do it through the lens of First Franklin Financial. They do a lot of personal loans and wealth management business, and so we're going to view this problem for the first time for some of us through the lens of how they experienced it, how they dealt with it, and then also some tips and tricks as to how we can all self-diagnose, see if this is something we might be dealing with and if it's time to turn to a partner. And then we can always answer some questions there at the end. But we at Check are a global brand. We're doing this for a lot of companies, a lot of financial companies and banks. You can see probably several logos you're familiar with here on the screen, but the only reason I show these slides is because cybersecurity is a network game. You want to work with somebody who has a large network and can detect novel threats more quickly than anybody else, and that is exactly what Check can do. We're active on over 60,000 websites. We analyze something like 21 billion trillion signals per day, and that is where our data comes from. But how did this first unfold? And if you look at this through the lens of one of our customers, First Franklin Financial, they're personal loans. They have over 300 regional offices. They operate in I believe 8 states, and they actually were starting to see some really suspicious stuff within their marketing campaigns, specifically within their digital marketing campaigns. They had near zero conversions from several of their campaigns through an extended period of time. They thought that was a little fishy. And I know everyone's been complaining about marketing efficiency ever since Apple decided to kill tracking on Facebook, but it was even beyond that. It was some serious 0,0,0,0 stuff. Not only that, around the same time, they're seeing all these low conversion rates. They're seeing, kind of inadequate return on ad spend. They're also starting to see junk applications flooding their system. They're starting to notice thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people applying for these retail loans who either never applied for them or they were just fake applications entirely. And at the same time, they have their web analytics team looking at all these things, and they see spikes, peaks, and valleys, traffic that makes no behavioral sense, and it's all over the map. And so they're trying to make sense of, why is my marketing campaign not producing the revenue that I thought it was? Why are my underwriters constantly rejecting applications that are either clearly bogus or from people who claimed they never submitted it? And why do my website metrics keep spiking at 2 in the morning? Or why do I see tons of visits coming from Bangladesh when I only do business here in North America? All of the above. All these weird things all happening all at the same time. And that's a growing problem for everybody, but particularly for the financial industry. Now, if you actually look at the trends, and I personally am of the opinion that these trends were accelerated in a pretty drastic way by the likes of Anthropic and OpenAI creating this army of scrapers to just go find everything on the internet to make our lives easier, but that has implications and second-order impacts. And so what you've actually noticed is over the past couple of years, the past year specifically, there's been a 33% increase in this kind of fake traffic on the internet. And as of today, I believe the current estimate is that humans are outnumbered by bots about 5 to 1 online when you think about all the new and novel ways we're deploying automated technology to make our lives easier. Now, that's on its own just a number, but if you think about what does that number mean, specifically in the paid channel, where there's hard dollars going back and forth, sometimes millions or tens of millions of dollars going back and forth. Over the past 12 to 18 months, you've seen that go from about 3% of your paid dollars being wasted. Now it's closer to 10.1% in the financial industry specifically. Now, that's because of the rise of not only the types of AI services that I just talked about, but also because now everyone has access to tools to commit fraud. You can go online and buy a bot as a service for about $5. You can subscribe for $19.99 a month to get the new fraudulent features that are available to you. And this is not as hard as it used to be. I've had a marketer on our team give it a whirl, not a coder by any means. 5 minutes later, came back with a working bot. And that's if you want to build it yourself. If you want to buy it, it takes about 5 seconds. That's pretty scary when you think about how much you trust somebody like a Google to spend your money effectively. And so at the end of the day, this is a growing problem, and it will hit the wallet. It's just a matter of when you will notice it. And financial keywords in particular, has anyone here ever thought they were just a bit too expensive? Anyone bidding on insurance terms might get up to like $100 cost per click depending on your region and your term. These things can add up very, very quickly when you get thousands of those fraudulent clicks coming through in a matter of seconds or minutes. And so being able to stop that's very important. But it's a growing problem, particularly in these high-cost advertising industries like finance. And so we're seeing a lot of this type of activity, but it's not just paid, it's across the board. You'll see direct traffic, organic traffic, all of these things starting to get bigger and bigger and bigger and faker and faker and faker. That's what we're up against. Now, there's a couple different things that it actually does. So let's start with the obvious stuff. If I spend $125 even on a click and a bot clicks that ad, I have wasted my money. I can't get that dollar back. That's happening all the time. I don't know if anyone in this room in particular has been constantly on the receiving end of marketing from somebody like a Google to go put it in the smart campaign, use the automated option, manage it yourself. We have self-service tools, and then all of a sudden the quality goes down, the fraudulent applications come, and people are left wondering why, especially when you're doing something like a target conversion rate and it still doesn't really get you where you want to go. These are the types of things you should be looking for because the marketing budget is not by nature safe, it's actually very exposed. It's out there, outside of all your security systems, exposed to the entire world trying to bring customers in. And so that's where a lot of the waste does happen. And in Google search in particular, it's very, very expensive. The other piece that the financial industry likes to do quite a bit, which attracts these type of actors, is promotions. And so when you're coding up a bot and you're trying to commit some kind of fraud, usually you're looking for something. You're either trying to steal somebody's data, create a financial advantage for yourself, or abuse a promotion. And so if you start to see fake applications, fake users coming in, if you're running one of these sign up and get $500 promotions, that might be why. These act like honeypots. These types of offers really do attract the nefarious actors on the web because that's what they're looking for. They're looking for a financial gain. And so in the advertising ecosystem, maybe it's something as simple as spoofing your website and stealing the dollars that you're trying to bid on. In the promotional space, maybe they're actually creating a fake account and they're trying to actually get through your systems to steal directly from you. I know I get offers for $500 if I fill this account, $50 if I refer my friends. PayPal saw this happen about 3 years ago, and they lost $45 million on a $5 coupon. $45 million. These people were coding up bots that were then referring their own fraudulent accounts back to themselves and getting $5 coupons from PayPal at scale. And with PayPal, the coupon is just in your account. It's just $5. So $45 million sounds pretty bad. Who here wants to lose $45 million today? Anybody? No? That's not the worst part of that, though. What happened the next week when they reported their quarterly growth numbers to Wall Street? Who can guess what happens when you have to say that those 2.5 million accounts that signed up last quarter didn't really sign up and they were all fake? How does Wall Street react to that kind of information? They run, they sell. They sell a lot. Their stock went down about 27% the next week when they reported this. When you have a multi-billion-dollar market cap, that hurts. People get fired over this type of stuff, but it doesn't have to happen if you can identify it. Now, if it's happening to PayPal, if it's happening to the mom and pop credit union around the corner, I guarantee you it's probably happening to y'all in some way. The question is, how big is this problem for you, not does it exist or not? Because if you're doing business online, that's just the neighborhood you're in. Now, there's other ways it's a little sneakier. Promotion abuse, they're just stealing from you. Everyone understands stealing. Theft is pretty straightforward. But then you have things that are a little bit less obvious that happen over time. There's no flash in a pan, no lightning bolt moment, but if anyone in here is running long-tail customer journeys, trying to get people who didn't convert, trying to retarget them, trying to do all these things to make effort towards our ICP. These people who came in, they looked like they were perfect. Those retargeting pools often also are polluted by invalid users. A lot of these programs They hit your site, and then once they hit your site, many of us are using like an Adobe Test and Target, a Salesforce Marketing Cloud, or whatever it may be, an ad roll. It could be any of these vendors. They're all looking at the data from your website and then retargeting the users that came there, especially if they hit certain pages, certain actions, certain events. That's another area where a lot of people start to see waste. They start to see lack of efficiency, and they start to wonder why. Shouldn't my retargeting be a little bit cheaper? Shouldn't I be able to acquire these people a little bit more predictably? But this is actually one of the places where it hurts the most, because over time that cookie pool can be poisoned by bots. If you're constantly retargeting to the wrong ID with the fraudulent user, all you're doing is sending money into the ether. It's like throwing the money straight into the trash. And you can't see that right away, but that's the sneaky part. It's like poisoning the well. When you have a chemical problem, it doesn't happen, I don't drink the well water and die the next day. It's like 10 months later, or 10 years later, I have a health problem, and all of a sudden I find out. So that's a little bit sneakier, but it's happening all the time. And the last problem, which can be a pretty big one, depending on your segment, is how does this actually affect my optimization? We're all data-driven marketers here. I'm sure everybody in the modern era fashions themselves somebody who's data-driven, or at least tries to be. We have companies up here talking about rebuilding entire CRMs to give better access, self-service Tableau dashboards. All these things are great, but they rely on a fundamental shared set of data, and that has to be accurate. So if your bots are clicking on your ads, they're submitting applications, they're in your MarTech stack, they're on your website, they're floating around, bopping around the internet, they're also in your analytics. So whether you're using like a GA4 or an Adobe Analytics or maybe like a Looker Studio from Google, any of these programs, they're all looking at the website data that was produced, in some cases, by bots. That becomes a little problematic because Google, they're trying to sell you traffic, so they do a pretty good job of actually trying to keep the traffic clean. They make an effort. They have systems in place. It's a walled garden. It's not a free-for-all. Your website, in many cases, unless you've made significant investments, is a bit of a free-for-all. The direct traffic does not have Google watching the henhouse for you. It's just out there. And so you actually see much higher rates of fraud, bot traffic, et cetera, when it comes from direct to site. So while you may see something like in the 5 to 10% range on a platform like a Google or a Facebook, or maybe even lower, you might see like a 27 to 35% range directly to your website, unless you've made significant investments in security and bot mitigation already, and then maybe you're a little bit lower. But there are still novel attacks out there that have been designed specifically to get around the legacy vendors. The Cloudflares of the world can't detect everything, especially not the new stealth bots that are generated by artificial intelligence. But that comes down to call into question what you're doing with your website. And I have one story that's kind of interesting. It was actually a wealth management firm out of Phoenix. They were targeting specifically high net worth individuals. Their big thing was webinar programs. They knew who their target market was. They wanted to speak to them. They wanted to be thought leaders. So what are they using their website for? Webinar ideas. They want to see what's engaging. They want to see what the best stuff out there is. They want to use that to create more content that will resonate with the high net worth individuals of Phoenix. Problem is, when we started running the analysis with their website, is these registrations into the webinar program were sometimes 15, 20, 30% fake. And that comes from a landing page where the traffic could have been even worse. And so their entire content schedule for months out that is planned based on their blog, based on their website activity, based on all these things, that is meant to be a slam dunk, their first party data was all called into question. That's a big problem, because that's not just $1 wasted, that's months of your time, that's targeting, that's revenue opportunity going to someone else if those people were in market. There's only so many high net worth individuals in Phoenix. If they're going somewhere else at that moment, you just missed your shot. It might be several years before you get another bite at the cookie. That's a tough reality that we're all living in, but that is the reality the digital marketer faces today. The internet just is not as safe as it used to be, if it ever was. Now, there's a lot of stuff you can do about that. So you're not completely on your own, you're not completely defenseless. Google gives you some tools. You could go in there, you can manually block IPs within the Google instance. So if you notice something really problematic, you want to look at that and block it yourself, you should absolutely do that. Google gives you the tools to do that on a campaign level. It's a little bit of work, but you can do it. We automated that process for First Franklin Financial. So what we were doing is identifying all these things, taking all the relevant IDs, platform IDs, IPs, et cetera, and using every single tool available via every single platform to suppress all the fake users from ever seeing another advertisement again. In combination with some data enrichment, making sure we could identify these bad leads, get them out of the application process earlier, notify the trust and safety team, make sure that they're not letting that account access anything, work together with our partners over there, which will be very thankful to the marketers for having figured this out for them. So you'll get a nice pat in the back for that one. But for them, the impact was quite staggering. And once they started blocking the fraud, they started blocking IPs, they started cleansing their retargeting audiences and enriching that lead data, there was a 30% reduction in their acquisition costs over time. Now, I don't think that was all checked, flipping a button and saved them 30%, but I do think that that was a big piece of the puzzle, is that once you get a clearer view of the picture, it's much easier to make better decisions. One of the things that often kind of gets wrapped up in those decisions is what happens when I do some of these smart techniques these platforms push on me. And what we often see is, like in a Performance Max campaign, as one example on Google, they'll automatically opt you into their partner network, which is flooded with bot traffic. And then you have to figure out how to get out of it and to block it all and do it all again. So stuff like that can be done on your own, but you have to maintain it, because there are very easy ways to accidentally opt back in. Now, in their words, they actually attributed the ROI of Check in that scenario to be a 10x investment. Now, do I think everybody's going to see 10x ROI on blocking ad fraud? I don't really know, but I've seen people do much more than that, and I've seen people do much less than that. But what I do know is I've never seen anybody come to me with 0 bots in their campaigns. So the most important thing is that you know, that you take the time to figure it out, whether it's with us or somebody else. I think everybody should be at least aware of what is happening on their storefront, because you would never allow into one of your branches a robot with a mask and a 9mm and just hope it's all okay. But on your website, you seem to do these types of things. And you need to be a little more cautious. Now, there's a couple things you should be thinking about to solve this without me. Solve this without a vendor, solve this without anybody. Now, some of you have great first-party data you can rely on for targeting, and if you've collected it, it's verified, they have an account, we know who they are. Those are great ways to do audience marketing. But you can also look at things like IP reputations and kind of put some initial blocks on for industry-known bad data centers and try to get some of the most nefarious actors out of there early on without anybody giving you that. There's free vendors out there, IP reputation, IP quality score. These are one data point. They're helpful. You should also be looking at, within your campaigns, where does this fake traffic tend to come from? It tends to come from newer channels, for one. Like, I've had customers who test out things like TikTok advertising, and while they see tons of impressions, tons of traffic, they see tons of bots as well. And those tend to be more nefarious bots. We've seen them scheduling appointments, getting all the way down the funnel, and doing various different actions on the site. So that's one thing you can do. Check the marketing sources, and check if it's a premium publisher source, or if you're going into some sort of secondary inventory. That's where a lot of those bots will come from. The second thing is traffic analysis. And so if you have the ability, you have a data team, you have Tableau, you have a Looker, you have a Snowflake instance, you have any kind of web analytics tool at all, even if it is just the free version of GA4, take a look at what's happening on an hour-by-hour basis. If you notice gigantic spikes at very odd times, it's kind of like those signs you see all over the subway here in New York City. If you see something, say something. Like, maybe that's something that shouldn't be there. What else can you be looking for within that data set? Things like geo. One of the most common things you see is a lack of geofencing accuracy. Maybe you told Google, I only want USA campaigns. But when you start to see that that is not happening, that's a very telltale sign that somebody is either targeting you, or you happen to be caught up in a keyword cluster that is under attack for someone else. It's not always you. Sometimes it's your neighbor who's attracting all this attention, but finance is a very, very competitive marketing space. All these keywords have an extreme financial incentive to be abused. There was actually a strange example not too long ago, it was maybe about 6-ish years ago, where it was actually a Russian hacker had spoofed the New York Times website. And they did that by scraping it, creating a copy of it, and then inserting their copy of it into the ad exchange. And so if you thought you were selling an ad to the New York Times, maybe they were buying it on your front page, maybe they were doing a takeover, maybe you thought you were just selling some remnant inventory to a known publisher. You might not have been in that time period. I think he made away with something like $27 million before the FBI caught him on a wire fraud charge. But that was all done by scraping, deploying an automated tool, copying a known verified website, and then inserting that into an ad exchange where you would never be the wiser. It took the entire Justice Department to find this guy. So that's why the best thing you can do, nothing Google can do about that. Google didn't really do anything wrong. They just missed it. You need to protect yourself. You need to make sure you have something on your site that can see these types of things. And so looking at the traffic is great. If you start to see a traffic source with 0 conversions, always investigate that. I know we're all conversion obsessed, but there's also the fraud angle that we sometimes don't think about. A lot of marketers are thinking about, how do I target that better? How do I get that in front of a better audience? They're not thinking about, did I just throw all that money away to someone who's not even really a human? Did I just literally waste that dollar or that $100 or that $100,000. Or if you go all the way back to the Uber use case, like Uber made a big show out of this a couple years back where they peeled back $91 million in digital ad spend and saw no change in their metrics. That was a heavy programmatic buy they were doing, and there's a case to be made that those are riddled with fraud depending on the platform you're doing it with. And so being aware is very important here, because being aware can help you understand if you even have a problem or not, if this is something you need to solve for, and the impact it can have on you. There's other things that are a little more down funnel, getting out of the performance marketing ecosystem for just a minute here. That could also be telltale signs that you're having some kind of issue. So when you come to First Franklin Financial with all these applications, one of the things that first set them off, get thousands of applications flooding your systems, was bounce rates. You start to see that the welcome email is not going through how you expected it to. Maybe they didn't actually fund the account, but so you do the follow-up email to say, hey, you left off here, and that's getting a response from somebody who claims they never applied for an account with First Franklin Financial. So weird responses, high bounce rates. There's some pretty negative impact that can bring to your brand, whether it be on the quality score of your domain, affecting all future email sends. I've seen customers that had a really bad bot problem within their CDPs. They had a lot of fake users in there. They send an email campaign out, all of a sudden they have like a 67, 70% bounce rate on that. You're in the doghouse now with Gmail. You actually have to work to get back out of there. You got to go through the whole process again of getting your domain reputation back up. Worst case scenario, maybe you need to buy a new subdomain and start warming that one up. I've seen all these things happen, and once it happens, it takes months to fix this type of stuff. If you're lucky, sometimes it could take a little bit longer, but I've seen these type of domain reputation problems take 2, 3, 4 months to get back out of and spin back up a new reputable sending domain. That's a big problem, especially if you're someone who relies on a lot of personalized one-to-one communications, and now the communications that are going to your best customers aren't even making it out. They're going back to spam. And not because that customer marked you as spam, because the platforms did, because you weren't keeping guard of your house, you didn't keep your house in order. These are all things that can happen in a worst case scenario. And sometimes it is something as simple as complaints. If you've ever gotten that weird thing, why are you calling me? Like, how'd you get my phone number? Why am I in this system? I thought I didn't sign up for this. That creates compliance issues. Now, maybe you didn't do anything wrong. Maybe you didn't email someone who didn't opt in, but maybe someone stole their information on the dark web and then used you as a vehicle to test it out. That happens all the time, especially if you're in the payment space. That's why PayPal was always such a big target. But if you're also facilitating payments, personal loans, any of these sort of financial instruments, we seem to see very high rates there as well. And these are problems that very small in the beginning, and they become very hard to manage if they left unaddressed. Depending on how your bank is set up, depending on what products you're selling, if you have a network of agents, if you have a network of wealth managers, and you're actually shipping all these leads from your corporate website out to them, we've seen some customers that actually had as many as $1 million in losses when it comes to all the call center resources they assigned to these fake leads, all the people that actually spent time sending out personalized mailers, following up, trying to schedule appointments. That's a big time suck, and beyond the time, there's trust that you have to regain with your network of agents now. And so if you're actually the corporate arm and you're sending all this crap down to these people who paid to be in your network, and the stuff that you're sending them with the dollars they helped pay for is not good, you lose a lot of trust in the process. And then you have a churn problem potentially. Then you have people who are looking at different networks to sell for, different franchises to start with. So there's a lot of different ways this could come up. But I think the most important thing, if anyone takes one thing away from this talk today, is that this is a problem that is growing, that will not get any better, unfortunately. I think it will only get worse. We've actually seen, just this past year, with automated technology designed to bypass the likes of like a Cloudflare and Akamai, all these traditional security vendors that you've heard of, there is a 450% increase in the creation of bots designed to get past bot mitigation solutions. If you go to Reddit, you can find it very, very quick. It's called Puppeteer. You just look it up. It's right there to download. All of a sudden, you got the keys to the kingdom. 450% increase in the use of that type of a bot. There are more malicious bots that saw, smaller usage, over 600% increases in usage this past year. And some of these things even have things like credit card scrapers built into them now. There's actually one bot network where you can actually go online. I'm not going to share the name of it right now because I'm not trying to promote fraud. But I actually look at this every couple of months, and it operates like any normal business. There was a Black Friday sale last year. You could buy the bots cheaper. You could also add add-ons. You want to upgrade your package. You want to go from just committing click fraud to committing credit card fraud. Got your back, no problem. $5, not that hard. These things are getting more comprehensive. So it's like going to Salesforce and buying the complete suite of fraud tools you need, but it's just some guy who coded it all up and is now letting it loose. And so these are the types of things you should be looking for. Any questions? What's up?
All right.
Oh,
Hi.
we got a mic over here.
Yep, thank you.
We'll get you next.
Okay, thanks for this. I'm new to this area. I'm learning about it. So we are launching a payments app, hopefully within the next 4 weeks. And I think that I get where the possible vulnerabilities are. We have a website that we're going to promote as a waitlist sign up. So evidently there could be vulnerabilities there, right? And then once we launch, we'll have the regular site. But it's an app download. Are there vulnerabilities for fraud for app downloads that are different from website visits? And if so, what do you know about that? How could I find out more about that?
That is a great question. And I think the best answer I can give you is I don't think the vulnerabilities are fundamentally different. It's just your store is on a different street, right? So as of right now today, like the check stands, we do everything based on the website. We are releasing our mobile SDK in Q1 because of the prevalence of requiring that within the finance industry specifically, and we've seen a lot of requests for that. So the underlying detection methods are very similar, and the underlying vulnerabilities are very similar, but I actually think the stakes are a little bit higher because if you're on someone's phone and you get access to that, there's a lot more attacks you can then carry out when you kind of take over that. They will actually refer to these devices as slaves, and so they have bot masters, and their big goal is just to enslave your device so that later on they could use it in an attack. And so the biggest one has about 150 million active computers in their network right now, and that's why phishing is important, because we don't solve for phishing, but phishing is where the bots come from, right? They do these things, they hit up your grandma, they say you're in jail, they say that your boss needs their laundry or whatever it might be, and all of a sudden your computer and everyone on your network is infected, and that's where the bots come from. And so yes, absolutely there are vulnerabilities there. I think the style of vulnerability is very similar. It's just, like I said, a different storefront.
Time for one more question.
And then we're at booth 1 if you need us.
So I noticed recently we started soliciting for email addresses on our website. Do you want to know more about nonprofit credit counseling? We noticed a lot of Gmail accounts coming through. How effective is CAPTCHA?
I don't want to scare you too much. CAPTCHA doesn't do anything.
It doesn't do anything?
The bots actually solve CAPTCHA at a higher rate than humans now.
Oh, interesting.
And so most CAPTCHA products are mostly to make you feel good as opposed to actually have an impact. Now, they can work if people are using less sophisticated bots. So it depends how sophisticated your fraud is. Any bot made after like this year will just bypass it. But if they're using old code, they're lazy, which people are, it will stop that type of stuff. Now, with the Gmail question is interesting because that's a question of is that good for your business or not, right? Some businesses despise the Gmail address. They don't want it in their system. They think it's junk. They want only verified business emails in the B2B world. In the consumer world, it's a little bit harder when you need to accept that type of stuff into your funnel, right? We take a bit of a more nuanced approach to identifying that user. We just look at the email as one component. We had to do a whole behavioral analysis on the entry method. How did they get there? Did they use a different technique to enter the form? Is there any reputation problem with that? So we do a whole behavior analysis on the form page to give you a richer view of what you want to do with that. And so we can get into the specifics for that use case, but there's actually a lot you can do with a form to identify different types in fraud and then determine if you want to maybe send it to nurturing, do different things, block it outright. But you can make decisions once you have the data and the transparency available to you.
So unfortunately, I'm going to have to draw this one to a close. I was getting so depressed, however, maybe.
But it's all okay.
It's
you can just buy check.
Just talk to Lucas. Let's give him a hand for a great presentation.